I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. So, as you know, this podcast was pretty much inspired by Dee Dee Ramone, and I'm sure if he and Joey were alive, they'd be big fans of my guest today, whose band takes, kind of slug of the Ramones, a dash of the Muffs, a bit of a shot of Joan Jett, and I'm going to say a party bag brimming with Blondie's finest. I don't know why I keep insisting on doing this sort of stuff sometimes, but anyway. Their last album, which was Daydream Explosion in 2019, is kind of chock-a-block, full of hooks, riffs, melodies, and real kind of pure joy. And I tried to think of someone who does it better than them, and as you'll be getting used to by now, I kind of failed in finding that out. I do think though that it's their best album over their and kind of get this 20-year career, which is amazing, and one where. Which is really interesting for me, is where they've successfully, experimented frequently with crowdfunding. I think that's really, really interesting. And also that album has got my song on it, I Know How to Party, which was never more evident than last weekend when I was walking back to my room at the end of one of the Rebellion punk festival days with a bag of licorice, all sorts. I mean, you don't need to look any further for the definition of punk rock. It's right there. So, with no further ado, Kelly Ogden of the Dolly Rots, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know you're incredibly busy and just back from some touring as well.
Yes, I'm very happy to be here. And since this is inspired by Dee Dee, I would like to show you that I have this little special magical box with a picture and one of his pics that a fan.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, like many, many years ago. And I actually play a pic. Oh, there's one in my pocket. Let me see. Just like Dee Dee's, except I put grip tape on mine.
Oh my!
But yeah, so it's kind of special. Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of incredible. He was, everybody's kind of written about him, but such an incredible, kind of icon. And it was actually the Ramones was the band that really sort of changed my life. It was the first time that I heard them. I think it was Judy's a Punk off the first album. That was it. It was just like kind of game over, That was it.
Yeah, when I learned about them when I wanted to learn to play guitar, and I was like,
yeah.
Oh, hey, I think I could play this, and then when it was time to learn bass, because our bass player didn't want to keep going, I was like, hey, time to play some Ramones songs, and that's pretty much how we learned. We learned to play music by playing Ramones songs. It was the Misfits and the Ronettes.
Yeah, of course, yeah. What sort of first attracted you? Kind of back when you were a kid. I mean, was it in your home? Was it really just always around you?
I grew up listening to mostly top 40 music with my. It was always top 40 stations. Casey Kasem's top 40 every Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, he listened to a lot of like marching music and Irish music. So I kind of listened to a lot of that. In that home. And then as I got to choose my own things, a lot of it was influenced by my friends' parents' record collection and things that they listened to. So my best friends, it was sisters, their dad had an amazing record collection. He was a hippie, that's where I learned all about Kafka, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, I kind of like got into all that at the same time that I asked Lewis, who is my husband and songwriting partner, baby daddy, the partner of my life. I asked him to teach me to play guitar. We were 16, and he was all into punk rock and Nirvana. It was the 90s, so he taught me all of that stuff. Rockabilly. He was in new wave, so it was kind of this. Mixing of all of our influences. I always listened to oldie radio. When I was in the car, I would usually have it on oldies. So that's where a lot of the girl groups and rock and roll influence comes from. So it really does span a lot of musical styles.
Yeah.
But when Lewis and I sit down and make music together, what comes out of us is Dolly Rots, and it's very heavily influenced by just pure rock and roll, and
Yeah.
the more simple kind of rock and
The
roll. We never
simple.
got into prog rock or metal or
Yeah.
even some of post punk.
Mm.
It's never really been our jam, and
Mm.
jamming never been our jam. So
Mm. No, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Those sort of influences. I remember, like when I was a kid, my dad was really into. He was. I mean, his main thing was sort of classical music. He was sort of classically trained, and he took me down that route as well. But he also listened to kind of stuff like Nat King Cole and Bill Haley. He was very much into that sort of rock and roll period as
yeah.
well. But my recollection is that it was kind of classical that was the sort of influence. But I got into punk rock, and it was almost, I think it was like a kind of, I mean, it sounds a cliche, but a kind of rebellion against your parents. It sounds really cliched, doesn't it?
No,
But
that's exactly Lewis's story. He
mm,
started piano when he was like 4 or 5. His
mm,
dad, every time his dad comes to our house, he plays piano. He walks in the door and just starts playing piano. And I mean, Lewis's family, he was born in Ecuador. They're like
yeah,
first generation immigrants. Everything was a little bit more formal and proper, and they listen
yeah,
to classic when they eat dinner. And and so
yeah,
as soon as he heard punk rock, his uncle gave him a guitar, and he stayed in his bedroom and learned. At first it was every Nirvana song, and that
yeah,
how he taught himself to play. That was how he pissed off his parents, and
yeah.
that it very much follows the same path for him.
I kind of had like that thing about sort of pissing your parents off. I mean, I'm an only child, and I kind of struggled with that. I wanted to do, but there was this sort of feeling that I'm the only child. My mum had sort of before I was born, she'd had a miscarriage, so I was like
Small child.
exactly, the spotlight's on, and I thought, oh god, I can't piss them off again. I can't do it. That feeling was around. It's weird, isn't it, when you think back?
I was a really good kid,
Mm,
mostly, and all of the naughty stuff I did was still pretty safe. Um,
yeah.
and Lewis too. I mean, we were both really, really good students. We went to an honors college,
Mm,
on scholarships. We were safely rebellious. But
safely. Yeah.
our greatest rebellion was we graduated college. I have a bio degree. He did
Mm,
neurobiology, and we did music, and
yeah.
that was the worst thing that had ever happened to our families, probably pretty much.
Was it?
Until it became somewhat successful, and now everything's fine.
I mean, did your family want you to use your degree, your education to pursue it like a
Yeah, it was.
proper career?
Yeah, I mean, it was expected that Lewis would be a doctor,
Yeah.
and my parents, they were definitely not as strict with
Mm,
me. The deal was, hey, if you get really good grades, you're a good kid, you're healthy.
yeah.
I played all sports.
Mm,
If you were doing well, then like I earned freedom. I earned a lot of
yeah.
freedom. Do a lot of things that there's no way in hell I would let my kids do. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
And that also led into what I chose to do as a career, which
Mm,
at that point in my life, I wanted to work with animals. I love science, mostly biology.
yeah.
And I wrote my thesis on sea turtle nesting, and
Yeah.
I mapped the entire coast of Sarasota County, Florida, with
Mm,
GPS. In the old days, it was like this big, heavy backpack.
yeah.
Um, and I love science. I still love science, and so I was going
Mm,
to be a scientist. And then we had to make that decision. It was the very end of college, or it's a 4-year college,
mm,
and there was a big election here in the States. It was
mm,
the Bush Gore election.
yeah.
And, and when Al Gore seceded that night, we had an election party at our little
Mm,
complex we were living in at college. I was like, man, the world's going to end. This is it.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
better live it up for a year or two, because they're going to bomb
We're
everything. It's
kind of done. Yeah.
over. It was such a youthful way to look at things. And,
Yeah.
and I'm glad we did, because I was supposed to take my GRE exam. It was like a college entrance exam for grad school the next morning. And I told Lewis, I was like, I'm not going. I'm not doing it. I don't want to do it. I don't know what I want to do yet, but I don't want to go to, more college without knowing what my plan is. And he was like, good, because I don't want to be a doctor. He was like, I have no desire to be a doctor. And we made the plan to move to LA, which was crazy. It was totally crazy. We didn't know anybody there. But we had blind faith in each other, which has been what carried us through. And, our method has always been to say yes to opportunity and then figure it out after you say yes. And even when it's terrifying, and we scare ourselves constantly still. And so here.
I love all of this. I think this is an amazing and a brilliant, kind of example of how you use the context of this podcast, kind of like an open-mindedness and sort of willingness to say, you kind of like default is to say yes to your opportunities and then kind of figure it out from there. Because if you do it the other way around, have that kind of closed mindset, you're not taking the risks, but you've really kind of gone for it.
Yeah. And I think that's the only option. I think we're all presented with opportunity, and you can stick to the path that it looks like you're supposed to be on, but sometimes you're given an opportunity that's like a little bit of a side jaunt, and it might seem a little scary, or it might seem like you're not ready for, or like something you're just not sure about. And if you don't try it, then you never leave that spot where you're comfortable, and you don't grow. And so, I feel like the only way toward growth is by taking leaps. And so that's always been what we've done.
This must have given you, I'm maybe making a massive assumption, but this must have given you like a roller coaster of emotions, as by taking that approach.
Oh yeah. I mean, still, it's still, every tour is a leap of faith. It costs a lot to go out there and play these shows. We have kids now. We bring the kids. We have a crew. It's just like, if you build it, they will come. It's like Field of Dreams thing. And every record, it's like, all right, we're going to make this album. Our fans, we believe they're going to support it, and they do. And I feel like, by being very honest in what we do, in obviously working hard, I think people have grown to respect and just like what we do, because you can kind of see what it is. It's all right there on the surface. It's not very hard to figure us out. And so I think, by letting people in a little bit and sharing the way that it's been, might make the music even make more sense to people.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And I think that is what one sort of shift almost over, I don't know how many, past 10 years, and it gets I feel it gets greater each year, that the bands that really kind of like establish that kind of connection with their fans and are open enough and willing enough to share, that this is the reality. It's not what you see on 99% of the Instagram accounts. This is kind of the reality. It's not easy. I think it helps with that kind of rapport, and sort of like you become real.
Yeah. It's pretty much the opposite of what it was like when we were growing up, where our favorite bands who were touring was the Pixies and Nirvana and Bikini Kill. And Bikini Kill, you know what they were about, but everyone else was so mysterious, and in their interviews, they'd be really coy, or they would just like have these blatant, like fake stories that they would tell just for fun, because they didn't want to share their true self. And I mean, a lot of the time I wish it was still that way, that would protect me, like myself in some ways. But also I feel like I've gained a lot. I've gained a lot of friends and people who would have been fans, like distant fans, are actually my friends now that I talk to online. We have comments back and forth, and I'm actually a human to them, which I think in the end is more I don't know, more worth it.
Do you feel that by sharing more of yourself, that there's there is a burden attached to that?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, there's still a lot that we keep
Mm,
private. In
yeah,
there's some really amazing, like mental health groups that reach out, like Punk Rock Saves Lives. We've been talking to
yeah,
them stuff, and you know, I feel as a band and as a thing that we do online and in person, we
mm,
try to keep things positive.
yeah,
Uh, we like to put positivity out into the world
yeah,
in music, in our our persona, online, our brand or whatever you want to call it.
mm, mm,
We really try to keep things positive. And when we're quiet, it probably just means we're like having a rough time, and
yeah,
you may just be completely exhausted and not have the energy to
yeah,
give extra positivity. And so that is the challenge. That was the challenge the last year and a half, 2 years
mm,
was wild being home, and just trying to find that positivity and inspiration inside. We didn't write very much at all. We
no,
started a whole bunch of songs and we didn't finish any of them
yeah,
because it just wasn't there. And when you're an empty vessel, you don't have anything to give. And
yeah.
so if we're not giving, it just means that what we want to put out in the world is not there.
Yeah, and I think if anything, as good as comes out of that is it's that people have started to realize that because they've seen it in themselves.
Yeah.
They've had to be home. They've been restricted. It's like so it's okay now. I kind of understand. We're talking about real people here. You
Yeah.
can't just turn the tap on and it automatically happens. It doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. And you
Yeah.
still, but it's funny, isn't it? You still sort of see, I see comments from, with, when some bands post something, and it's like, when's the next album coming? I haven't done anything for 4 years or 5 years. It's like, okay, well, there's a whole host of reasons why that might
Yeah.
not be.
Yeah. Writing music is not easy.
Yeah.
It's something that, a lot of things have to align for it to
Mm,
happen, in a
yeah.
way that isn't forced. We force ourselves to start, but
Mm,
if it's just not right, then we don't force ourselves to finish something. A lot of times we'll go back to those songs and we'll be like, why did we not get it? But it just might not have been the right time for it, or, we just
mm.
weren't in the mood, I guess. But we always try.
How do you know? Talk about that. I mean, how do you feel now when you look back at your early, early work,
My
sort
God.
of compared to where you are now?
I can't believe we were so critical of ourselves. You
Mm,
know, we were I mean, we looked back on a lot of our old demos and things like that for our most
yeah.
recent album called Down the Rabbit Hole. And, it's because it was 20 years of demos and just things we had never put out, alternate versions of songs that were on the
Yeah.
album. And, we were listening to like just these little recordings that we made. I was like, that's a great idea. Like, why
Yeah.
did we think that that wasn't cool? But, it just wasn't at that point or
Yeah.
date with us yet, or I don't know. But yeah, we were and have always been very critical of ourselves musically,
Yeah.
which is good. I think it helps that we're partners. Like when you have a songwriting partner,
Mm,
it's difficult. It's the one time where Lewis and I really butt heads. We don't in normal life, but
mm.
songwriting is definitely one of that's actually probably the most challenging thing we do together. And you check each other and you push each other, and it's definitely a weird collaboration.
Yeah.
Like our brains have to agree that something's good art, and that's weird.
Yeah. That's it. And these days as well, I think, with this sort of very complex world, that, kind of compromise and sort of seeing things from somebody else's perspective is really kind of important. And what does how does that sort of fit into the kind of the songwriting, and how where you have differences of opinion, how do you sort of resolve those?
I mean, we usually just do you mean when we take maybe something from out in the world and we bring it into our songwriting?
Yeah, yeah,
Which typically is something that happens more now. It's like, I know how to party, for example. You brought that song up. That, it's, that one is very much about us. It's very much about me. It's like, I'm bad at texting back my friends. My taxes are late always. That is like true story. But then we'll have some songs sometimes where, it's a little bit amorphous, and we're pulling a little bit from a friend's relationship, and then a past relationship, and we're pulling things out of the ether that don't necessarily belong together, but just kind of happen. When we write a song, we never sit down and we say, oh, it's like, we're going to write a song about how we're really good at partying, but we failed at a lot of other things. The song, it was probably a guitar riff, and then we're grunting around trying to come up with a word or words, and then it might have been like party, and we're like, oh, it's party, it's a party song. It's like, oh no, it's not a party song.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Failures. And the songs, we like it when the songs kind of write themselves. We don't really sit and craft them so much. And we've worked with different songwriters in the past, and I have a project with my friend Jarrett Reddick from Bowling for Soup called Jarrett and Kelly, and when we have time to sit down together and write songs, it doesn't matter what's going on, doesn't matter if we're hungry, what time of day it is, like we have to sit down and write a song, no matter what we feel. And so those are a little bit more crafted sometimes. But Lewis and I prefer to, like, have a glass of wine really late at night and see what falls down from the heavens. And that's what we write about, so it's different. It's different every.
Do you get what's the sort of the phrase? Like if you sort of bring an idea, and let's say I mean, this could be music, could be kind of anything, anything in life, where your idea sort of get, because I feel sometimes, if I have an idea, it becomes your thing, your little kind of baby, especially if you put a lot of effort into it, and then if it gets rejected or if people start tampering with it, it's hard not to be defensive about it.
That's why songwriting makes us argue. Because it's personal.
It's personal.
And even if it's just a dumb line, it's still kind of personal, and so it is tricky. And it's more tricky when it's me and Lewis than me and anybody else.
Yeah.
Because we are so close in life. I'm like, how could you not like this? Or I don't know. It is challenging.
It's funny. I remember maybe a couple of years ago, I did this. What's it called? It's a sort of writing class where you just write whatever comes into your mind. I forget what the name of it is now. Anyway, it's basically bringing stuff from the subconscious. You just write. And it's really weird. So, it's a similar kind of thing that, if you're going to write some lyrics, it's coming from somewhere. So it's going to be personal to you, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's challenging.
So, with like your kind of environment when you were in LA, and now you're in Tampa, you're in Florida, yeah. So what kind of role has that physical environment played in your lives?
I mean, it definitely is different. It's hard to separate that from becoming parents, though.
Yes.
We've kept it, and it makes sense because of your question. So we've had this apartment in Los Angeles near downtown. It's in Koreatown.
Yeah.
And we wrote everything in that building. We were actually in a studio first, then we moved to a 1-bedroom.
Yeah.
That building, that block, that neighborhood, the sounds, the smells, everything about that place influenced what came out of it musically. And then we had our first kid, River, there. And when he was 6 months old or 8 months old, we moved to Tampa.
Yeah.
And so, we did, while I was pregnant, we did Barefoot and Pregnant. in there. So that was the last album that we created in LA. And then, there was definitely a change when we did Whiplash Splash here. I was pregnant with our second kid when
Yeah.
we did that here. And, in a lot of ways, I can't separate it in my mind because, LA was, our like young adulthood.
Yeah.
It's freedom. It was the excitement of the success that we were having.
Yeah.
Of, going out all the time. We went out every night. We were going to shows. We were going to crazy parties. It was just a different era of life. We have decided we've kept that apartment because we want to go back and make an album there. Like we need to revisit that space to write and see, what comes out there, versus here because people always ask, why don't you play in Tampa? Why aren't you playing in Tampa? And it's because this space is motherhood. This is where I'm a mom. And no matter what I do, that's always what's happening in my mind first.
Yeah.
And so even if we're in our studio and the kids are at the grandparents, I still have trouble separating from the physical space because there's kids' toys in front of me and I gotta switch over the laundry or they're not gonna have clothes for dance tomorrow. And it's just a constant thing that's going on in my head. And so I think I have changed at the same time our place changed. So I'm not quite sure, but I'll report back when we make that album.
When you make it.
Yeah.
I mean that totally makes sense. The way you describe that totally makes sense. That of how you kind of distinguishing. I guess like maybe in sort of some way to distinguish your roles, if you will, even though they are together.
Yeah.
There's also less perhaps a sort of delineation that's happening as well.
It's something that I struggle to do on tour as well because we bring the kids with us. And we always have a tour nanny and we tour in an RV, so we have like a full kitchen. And ideally that is the green room for the kids. Kids stay in the RV or the bus. And then when I go into the venue to the green room, like I try to be Kelly in the band.
Yeah.
And like this last tour, we were playing in Texas and it was so hot that the kids were just there until the minute I got on stage. And I struggled a lot to like be rock and roll me. Like I was just like mom rock and roll me the whole time, which also worked. It was fun. The kids come on stage, but I'm at like a very strange teeter point, constantly trying to pick which human I am at any given time.
I totally empathize with that almost. I mean, actually, just as on a related note, I saw you supporting Bowling for Soup at Brixton Academy in London. Yeah, when and I saw River come on stage. Yeah. So I know what you're talking about. That was a brilliant touch. I love that. That's a great thing to do.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I think at this point, I'm just trying to mold them together and be a little bit more comfortable as like an older woman who is a mom who is front rock band. And there aren't very many people I can look to or ask about that. It's kind of a lonely, weird place to be. And I mean, it's definitely something I'm working on.
It's interesting actually, because I mentioned about just a bit of fun, but about Rebellion, the punk festival in Blackpool. So this year there was quite a lot of sort of conversational stuff going on in one of the rooms, and Rhoda Dakar, who was in the Body Snatchers, from the sort of early two-tone days, was talking. It was a talk about women in punk. So the Pauline Murray from Penetration, Gina Birch from the Raincoats, Gay Advert from the Adverts, and Rhoda was making the point that she's got two kids as well who are sort of grown up now, but it's like I can't just drop my things and come to if I get a call to go to rehearsal. Back in the day, I couldn't just drop my things. It's like, who's going to look after the kids? I just can't do it.
Yeah. And I mean, I have an amazing partner in Lewis, and a wonderful dad. He's such a good dad. But we do this together. Like, we're in a band together.
Absolutely.
And so it's mom and dad in a band together. If I was in a band separate from him, then I would have more freedom. We would both have more freedom to go hit a tour, because, we'll go on a tour, 5-day tour without the kids because they're home with dad or mom. But we don't have that, because we both have to go.
You both got to go.
So we have to bring the kids. So
you
don't, every now and then, actually the Brixton show was the only show the kids were at that tour. Because, we weren't sure what the logistics of that tour were going to be like. Still like undetermined how many buses there were going to be and who was on what bus. And, I don't like to throw the kids in there, which can be annoying to some people, or I don't want them in certain situations when I don't know people. It's
totally,
there's so many extra things that come along with it. So that tour was really hard for me. Like, cried a lot because I felt really guilt leaving our kids at home, and they were fine, but I didn't enjoy it. I really didn't.
I think those are the things that are, kind of unseen. They're not seen. Those. I mean, just some of the things you just mentioned there.
Yeah.
As they're very, very real, practical things that you have to think about, and that particularly when you're a mum.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of those.
So we've changed things the past few years. Like, every March we do a tour, and it coincides with their spring break, so it'll be like a 2-week tour, and they'll only miss a few days of school usually, and then do a lot of touring in the summer, which we just got home from, which is why I'm like,
well, I mean,
fun, and it's changing too, because now they like it. Like, now they're like, we're coming on stage tonight, right? And so I have to do some growing with who I'm going to be at this point.
I mean, it's we our identity shifts over our life anyway, doesn't it? If you just if you just stayed as you from when you were born, your identity shift, but your circumstances change. You've got other people to think about. You mentioned the personas that you have, and those are not easy things to manage. So I like what you're doing when you're saying that you're structuring touring. I mean, it's almost like you're structuring things around you, around what works for you and the family, and which is totally right.
That's all I can do.
All you can do. I mean, taking a step back again to when you first sort of started out. I mean, how getting into the scene, and the sort of the effort that it required, and the personality that it required for you to, or the mindset that it required for you to do that. I mean, looking back, how did you deal with that?
I still am very uncomfortable on stage. I've never, I don't know, I enjoy performing. I like knowing that people want to see that, and they enjoy it, but it's still one of the harder parts for me, and it always has been. In the past, I mean, I used to just drink a lot more when I was young. But that made me worry less, and it helped me perform because I wasn't so self-conscious. And now that I'm a mom, I don't do that as much. And so now I am a little bit more stuck in my head. I feel a little bit self-conscious. I get really nervous, which is also why, like, I need a quiet space to hide before I play, because I got to try and like build up the confidence to go do it, know? And so I think that part of me hasn't really changed. I think I'm pretty much the same as I always. Different things have changed about me. I mean, like, my body feels different. I'm a mom, I'm older, now I think I'm like, oh my gosh, like, should I still be wearing the same outfits that I used to wear on stage? I'm like, I think I'm just going to go back to wearing shirts now. And, it's just like all these weird things that just come with aging and growth. And I mean, it happens to men too. This isn't something that's just because I'm a mother. But that does also influence part of it.
It's the getting on stage thing. I think that one of my very early episodes of this podcast was with Jennifer Finch. And she was, she's amazing anyway. But she was talking about exactly this thing. She said she still does, but not as bad now. But she used to get incredible stage fright before going on, and you wouldn't think it.
Yeah. I don't think people think I do. Like, we always have just random people in the dressing room, like hanging out, and inside I'm dying.
Yeah.
And great. I can't wait.
Of course I can do it. Of course I can. Yeah.
Sure. I don't know, but I must like it to an extent, or I wouldn't keep doing it.
You wouldn't keep doing it. Yeah.
It's
just with mention about as we sort of get older. I guess that for most people, we tend to sort of become more risk averse. We don't take as many risks, because we're thinking, I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, I mentioned again in the intro about kind of crowdfunding over the years, just as an example of financing things, which is an experiment in itself. But kind of you have taken risks, and like you were saying earlier, you say yes and then kind of deal with things. How do you feel your risk taking or tolerance has changed?
I think we still make some leaps that frightening, but now it's more like grown up things, like buying a rental property, and other things. I mean, the tours are definitely a risk, but I know that typically that all pans out. Going overseas is one that I'm a little bit more hesitant to do now. We didn't do it enough to cultivate enough of a following for me to feel confident enough to do that. All right, cool.
That's okay. We're almost done anyway, because I know you've got a dash. So.
Literally.
Well, listen, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's been really, really terrific to talk to you, and some really brilliant stories, and thanks also for sharing some kind of the personal things about your journey as well. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been. Oh, wait a minute, it's happening again, isn't it? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Oh no. It has been wonderful, Giles. I had a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show, and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.